As the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United, Allina Health is focused on keeping our Loons in top condition. And with expertise in orthopedics, sports medicine, heart care, and more, Allina has the team to keep your family in the game too. The experts at Allina Health take the time to get to know you as a whole person, helping you achieve wellness for your mind, body, and spirit. It's an altogether better kind of healthcare. Learn more at allinahealth.org. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Sound of the Loons presented by Allina Health. And here we are heading into the home opener at Allianz Field. And how lucky are we to have the return of Christian Ramírez at Allianz Field. First ever appearance here, but returning to Minnesota, a legend of the game in Minnesota with Minnesota United. Thank you, Christian, for taking the time. I know you're incredibly busy, multiple children, practices, appearances, all of the above. So we appreciate you in Minnesota. All the fans in Minnesota appreciate you taking the time today.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
I got to talk to you a couple times last year when you were with Columbus, just for, catching up on this season and even interviewing you for the MLS Apple calls heading into games. But I want to just refresh here. I mean, I just was saying to you, I cannot believe that you haven't been in Minnesota to play a soccer game since 2018. It's like actually kind of mind blowing. I for sure thought our notes were wrong because I was like, that can't be. He's been with LA, he's been with Houston, 2 Western Conference teams. So your first time playing at Allianz Field is going to be on Saturday. Like, how, are you excited to come back? What's your
feeling? It's a mix of emotions, obviously. My wife and Zara and Nova will be there. The little guy won't go. He'll stay behind. But Zara was 2 months old the last time we were in Minnesota. So it'll be exciting. But I'm excited to see everyone, all the old faces, new faces, and just see Allianz for the first time in person.
Is Angie Blaker already like shooting you texts like, hey, you and your family better say hello? Because I remember in LA, you did the baby gender reveal while we were in LA for one of the games with Minnesota United. And Angie was running around like a chicken with her head cut off, trying to get the right, she was the only one who knew the gender of the baby, trying to get the right color balloons and keep it a surprise and like this whole big thing. So, I mean, Angie's got to be hitting you up already.
Yeah. She's meeting up with my wife, I think on Friday. And she's sorting her out for the game and stuff. But Angie, I've seen her multiple times. When Minnesota came to Houston, she came over for dinner. Last year when Minnesota came here for Leagues Cup, she came over to the house and saw Zara and Nova. So we've kept in touch. I keep in touch with Durkee, messaging every now and then, just shooting shots back at each other. So it's a good time.
Awesome. Well, I know the fans will be excited to see you back here as long as you're not scoring goals against Minnesota United on Saturday. But talk us through your journey. I mean, I think when you were here with Minnesota, you were just lighting the world on fire, right? I mean, scoring goals left and right. Now, I don't want to say it came naturally because you worked really hard for those goals, but the way you went about it and the way you did it and the way you played the game. And then you got traded, you went to LA, spent some time there, went to Houston, then you go to Aberdeen, Scotland, which I'm sure was a whole nother experience in and of itself. Yeah. And then you end up back in the United States with Columbus. So talk us through leaving Minnesota, heading to LA. What was that first journey like?
Yeah, when obviously it was tough to up and leave, especially Zara had just been born, and we had bought our first place in Minnesota. But I started to learn the business side of football, and LA was awesome because it taught me a lot about winning at this level. Playing under Bob Bradley, playing with Vela and Rossi and all those guys who had been such influential. So that following year on that Supporter Shield run, I learned so much both about myself, what to do when I wasn't scoring goals, and how to play for the team more, and the sacrifices that I needed to make, and it led to more wins. And then once again, once I thought I was settled, up and traded on deadline day to Houston, and to a club that was going through a transition. I think I only played one game under the coach who traded for me, and then he got fired. So it started to spiral right away, and the club went through a huge transition, and COVID happened and everything. So didn't turn out the way that probably was intended once we got traded there. So then coming up on the last couple of months of my deal, the opportunity to go to Scotland came about, and my wife was like, let's just go. I mean, if it works out, let's go. And we chased it and experienced it, learned so much about myself, about my family, and brought us closer, and just experienced the world. So that was a humbling experience, but a great experience nonetheless. And then when everything started to spiral down up north in Aberdeen, Columbus came calling after numerous deals in the summer window of 2022 fell through, whether it was at that time to the championship in England, to Turkey, to Saudi at one point, and back to MLS. All those fell through. So in the January of 23, Columbus came calling, and I think it happened in like 2 days. It was super fast, and I was excited for the project that was presented here, and what my role was going to be here. And yeah, I'm glad it all worked out. Ended up a champion, and it was a crazy ride last year.
So you weren't like hell-bent on getting back to the United States, because you just said there were some other summer transfer deals that were possibilities in other countries. So this wasn't just like hey, I'm looking to get back to MLS. We need as a family to get back to the United States. It's just that at the end of the day, that was the best available deal at that moment.
On deadline day in the summer, my bags were packed because the club said there was a club in the championship that, just for privacy reasons I won't name, but they agreed to terms with Aberdeen, and my bags were packed, and I was supposed to be on the next flight at 9 a.m. And they called me before that and said, don't get on that flight. We have something that came up, and we have to appeal it to the FA. And it was, I got docked a point for minutes of a foreigner. So I was short a certain percentage of minutes. And I had been sent home 2 weeks prior to the season ending, the following season, just because Aberdeen were safe, and the manager wanted to give debuts to young kids through the academy, and that ended up backfiring on me. So it's one of those that you don't think of, and so they appealed it, and then the appeal got denied. So that was on deadline day, and that took all day. It was probably 7 p.m. when they finally told me that it wasn't happening, and the last flight out was at 9 down to London. So yeah, it was tough to swallow that, but yeah, the next 7 months I just worked my butt off and stayed ready for any opportunity that presented itself.
So talk through that emotion though. I mean, you just said it was tough to swallow, but you're like sitting there waiting, your bags are packed, then you're waiting to hear. But even just like, okay, this team and this club was ready to trade me, to sell me on, and now here I am continuing to play for them. I mean, how do you handle those emotions, that roller coaster? I'm sure as time has gone on, you've gotten a little bit more used to it, and you've matured in that, because it's just something you have to deal with in the business. But how do you handle that?
It was tough for sure. And I've said it numerous times. It was like I would show up to training knowing that I wasn't going to play these next 7 months, and so just tried to be as professional as I could, out of respect for my teammates, and just handled myself in that way, and was ready whenever my name was called. I never got to really influence a game, because I would go into a game either when we were winning 3-0 or losing 3-0. So never really got to make an impact. And then I think as it got closer to myself, to January, and I saw that potentially there was more opportunities coming, but it was uncertainty. I was like, I continue another 6 months of not doing this. And so that was like the boiling point in December, where I had a bit of anxiety stuff and mental health stuff. And then came back to the States and got that all sorted, and I'm better for it now. And I learned so much, and I just pass that on to anybody that needs it.
It's funny because I feel like now that you've sort of come through that, it's easy to, not easy, but you can look back and go, I'm better for it. You know, I grew from that, but in the moment, and at the same time, you're like, well, I never want to do that again. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you're
sure.
better for it and you grew from it, you learned from it, but it's like, holy crap, let's not do that again.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's focus on the present. I mean, well, actually, let's focus on 2023 first. You know, what was that year like for you, the season for you? I mean, you can't come in. I don't know if you know you're going to be starting or not. I mean, nobody really ever does in this business for the most part. But like, you don't know, you're trying to make an impression. You're maybe adapting to a little bit the fact that you're coming off the bench again. But every time you came off the bench early on, you were making an impact, scoring goals, getting assists, you know, impacting the game in a positive way. And then you end up with the MLS Cup at the end of the season. Talk us through what that was like with Columbus Crew.
Yeah, so I got here and started off flying, and then I think it was like the third week of preseason, I got injured, and it was an injury to the bottom of my foot that we couldn't really figure out. So I was out for like 8 weeks and missed the first 4 games. And then when I come back, Cucho goes down for 8 weeks. So I just step in, and we have a good run of form. And then he comes back and we play a few games together. And then I'm on the bench for a bit, and then we start games together. And we go on another run, and then Lucas gets sold. And I'm still starting, and then Diego comes and start a few games, and then the last 10 games, I think I only started 1. And so my role fully changed at that point. And I knew late in the season, it's one of those that you just have to put your ego aside and be ready when your name's called upon. And it was called upon on, I think it was decision day against Montreal to start. So just be ready. And then the playoff run was the pinnacle, obviously, of just being able to repay everything for all the sacrifices that I made throughout the year, and being rewarded in that sense. Yeah, and luckily it ended up with 2 trophies.
So what was that, when you say to sort of repay some of the sacrifices, when you look back at that year and really your career, what do you think is the biggest thing you learned since? I mean, who knows? I mean, I guess we could say 2017, but I'm sure you were learning a lot of things even before that, but at least Minnesota United MLS time to now, what is the biggest thing you've learned and the lesson you've learned?
The successful teams in this league, there's so much sacrifice that goes into each individual for the group to be better off. And it's not just one person. And so when it was my turn to sacrifice late in the year, I could have very easily, and I've seen on other teams, guys turn into a problem for both the manager and for the guys in the locker room. And it takes a bad turn. And like, I've never wanted to be that. I've never been that. And I wanted to set a good example for everybody in the locker room that, look, I've been starting, I think I started 20 games and we won 12 or 19 games, won 12 of my starts and only lost 2 of those. So I did my part to get us to where we are at. And now it's my turn to sacrifice for the group. So I didn't change who I was, how hard I trained, the smile that I always carry. Yeah, I was hurt a bit because of it, but I never let that affect my relationships with the manager or with my teammates.
On the field, what is your role on this team? And does it change? You just listed off, you know, playing with Lucas versus playing with Diego's in there now, playing with Cucho, like whether you're up top as the number 9 or you're kind of in a wider area. I mean, how do you view your role on this team when you're on the field?
When I'm on the field, just be myself. It is new as of last year to defend more on the wide areas. But it's so clear in our system of how we defend that it makes it easier for me. So that's good. And I obviously naturally work defensively to free Cucho, especially when we play together, both offensively and defensively, so that he can find other pockets and draw some attention off of him. And yeah, when I'm not on the field, I'm trying to lead in other ways and pushing guys that maybe played in front of me to push them to make them better as well, and know that no one's ever happy being on the bench, but it's how you handle it. And so, yeah.
What's your favorite memory of Minnesota, your time in Minnesota? On the field, off the field, what's your favorite memory?
Off the field, I would just say, just with all the fans, seeing them after games or seeing them out is always a good time. Just because it feels like a big city, but you always see the same faces everywhere you go. So that was always cool. On the field, I don't know, seeing TCF, the first game that we won against RSL was special, because it felt like, did I have 2 goals that game? I'm not sure. I think, yeah, I had 2 goals that game, and it just felt like, oh, this is what it's meant to be like. And having such a good relationship with Manny and with Dr. Bill, and all those guys who have essentially saved Minnesota United from those days, to see how happy they were after that win was a special one to be a part of.
And then are you going to be flashing that tattoo to everybody on Minnesota United when you roll back in? Is it on your calf? Is that where it is?
Yeah, it's on my calf.
So you'll make sure to wear those warm-up socks nice and low, so everybody can get a nice close-up of the MLS Cup trophy, I'm sure, right? Yeah, I get it. I get it. You know, hey, and who doesn't want to be able to put that on their?
Yeah, we just got our rings last night, so that was nice.
You just got them last night? I thought you guys got them on the opening day, or was that?
Yeah,
just
so we did, but we had like a dinner last night to recap 2023 and to basically set the blueprint for 2024. So it was like we gave them back after the ring ceremony on Saturday, and then last night finally got to take them home.
You're not flashing it on the camera today.
I know.
No, for sure. You didn't like have your hand up here like the whole episode, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of like this Minnesota being like a big, big little soccer community, I was literally talking to someone at my daughter's soccer club last night, and she plays for NSSA now. And she's like, "Oh, Christian Ramírez, he came out and coached some of our practices."
Yeah. I used to, yeah.
Yeah, and she remembered right away. I was like, "Yeah, well, he's coming here." She knew obviously that you're on Columbus, and I was talking to her about how I was doing the podcast today. So I mean, it's like a little big soccer world. That's what I've always appreciated about Minnesota and having been from. I feel like Columbus is a bit the same.
Yeah,
have you found that there, like the culture and the community?
Yeah, I've noticed that as well, and that was part of their selling point on it. Drew comparisons city-wise and stuff. I think Minnesota's got a bit more of a downtown than Columbus, but the feel is still there.
That's awesome. Well, I know Minnesota fans are very much looking forward to seeing you here. Like, as I said, I'm sure they want to see you. They don't want to see you score, but they're looking forward to seeing you here. And I'm excited for you to see Allianz Field in person and walk out of that tunnel. I know you guys always do a little pregame field walkthrough. And if you thought TCF was like, oh man, this is what soccer in Minnesota should be like because it was a great crowd and fans show up, I think you'll fully appreciate Allianz Field in person. So thank you for taking the time today. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you on Saturday, and good luck to a certain extent on Saturday.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Christian. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, stay tuned. Segment number 2 with Tom Bogert coming up next. The 2024 MLS season is here, and there is room for you to join the excitement coming to Allianz Field. Whether you're trying to catch a match against LAFC, the showdown with FC Cincinnati, or a visit from the Seattle Sounders, visit MNUFC.com/tickets for tickets to the games you are most excited about. Single game tickets are on sale now, along with a variety of packages and group options to help you create the ideal Loons match day experience. All right, everybody, welcome back. Segment number 2 of Sound of the Loons this week, heading into Minnesota United's home opener, which is on Saturday. I think it's March 2nd. It's hard to remember what date it is, especially we throw a leap year in this year. It's really confusing me, but it's not like there's a lot going on with Minnesota United. No big news is broken as of recently or anything. So who else to have on but Tom Bogert? I've seen so many nicknames for you. Do you have a favorite?
Hey, how's it going? I'm firmly of the belief that you can't pick your own nickname. So at the risk of pissing off, the karma gods on that one, I do. Tommy Scoops is a good one. It's funny. Again, I did not come up with that myself. It all came organically. And again, I'm a firm believer in you can't pick your own nickname. So even if I didn't like it, that's what I'd have.
Yeah, I feel like it fits, it flows, it's got a nice ring to it. Plus you do have the scoops, so it makes sense. I could tell my daughter that, and she would relate it to ice cream, and I'd be like, no, it's not ice cream. It's all about getting the scoop on what's going on. So speaking of scoops, I just want to get right to it because fans are going to want to hear in Minnesota. You probably knew well before anybody on this planet knew, and maybe even before the ownership knew, that Eric Ramsay was going to be hired as the head coach of Minnesota United. But what are your thoughts on this? How did you see the developing aspect of this, and just big picture, little picture? What do you think about this hire?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting from, again, reporting out this story and talking to numerous people. Again, obviously the people in Minnesota rate him very highly. That's why they wanted him very badly. He was their top target. He stood out in a very extensive interview process that included international candidates, domestic candidates, candidates that are more experienced than he is. He's 32 years old. He's going to be far and away the youngest head coach currently in MLS, and either the youngest in league history or second youngest. So like it wasn't as if Khalid El-Hamad came into this and was like, no, like I want to hire the young, like I want to make a splash by that. Like there was a wide range of candidates. Eric Ramsay established himself as the club's preferred candidate. It was in the works for a little while. Obviously, there was a group of finalists that, again, they settled on Ramsay as who they wanted. They were able to get close enough to a deal, and then they still had to work out the finalities with Manchester United and leaving and everything else. But I'm sure we can get into that later. My big picture thoughts are he's a really bright guy, really talented guy. I've spoken to people that worked with him at United. I've read things about people that worked with him at Wales. And it all comes back that this guy's just a brilliant young coaching mind. Wales manager Rob Page called him, one of the brightest young coaching talents in the world. And that was kind of his reputation as he rose the ranks at United. My favorite point here is that I think a lot of coaches come in, they bring in their own staff. That's just how it goes. Usually when the manager gets fired, the assistants either offer their resignations or they're just moved on. Think of Chris Armas got to be Jesse Marsh's assistant for, I don't know, 4 days before Jesse Marsh got fired. And then the new manager is just like, yeah, why are you still here? Right? Like Eric Ramsay worked under 3 different managers at Manchester United. And not only was he staying on, he was increasing in importance with every manager to where Eric Ten Hag made him one of his assistants. So he's clearly got the respect of some of the brightest minds in European and English soccer. And I think that it's really cool that Minnesota convinced him, hey, this is your step. He turned down championship clubs that wanted to hire him, including Blackpool. And he was like, no, Minnesota United is where I want to be.
So to that point, though, when people are listening to this and they're like, oh, he's a really young, bright mind, like bright soccer. What does that mean? Like what in your bright mind does that mean? When we say a bright, what's the checklist for clubs when you're talking about that?
Yeah, first and foremost, obviously the coaching badges, the coaching qualifications, he's got all of them. So just in terms of like schooling and education in soccer, that's all there. You need to have emotional intelligence, obviously. Man management is such a big part of this job. He got to work under different managers. He was at Chelsea. He was with the U23s, I believe, at Chelsea before he was at United. So he's already got the experience in working with different managers. He speaks fluently, I believe, at least 4 languages. And
yeah, I was gonna say I thought I read 4 or 5, which is
it's 4 fluent, and then he's conversational in like a couple more. It's okay. Like that's unreal, right? Like so
that's amazing.
He gets to come in and he can speak to everybody in their native language like that. That's a sign of intelligence, and that's a sign of somebody who's going to be able to have a chance to connect to players a little bit easier than having to use a translator. And again, like everything that he's learned and honed, and his plans and discussions with Minnesota. Okay, this is how I want to play. From what I know, that they're going to want to play transition, pressing, youthful soccer, more up tempo than they had. That's something that Khalid Al-Hamad wanted that in this coaching search, and that's obviously what Eric Ramsay. That's how he sees the game. So again, from tactically to man management, that's where people talk about his, why he's a bright young coach.
When you say, he turned down offers in the championship and other teams, and he wants to be at Minnesota United. It was funny. I was at open training yesterday at Minnesota United, and I asked the same question. I go, why did he want this job? Why does he want to come to MLS, let alone Minnesota United? And it was like, I almost got laughed at. Like the intrigue for, not just because of Minnesota United, but because of MLS. Like, there are a lot of coaches, just like players, that want to be here and a part of this league. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, every team, loves to tell me how many people reached out to them when they have a managerial search, right? Like, so there's every team in this league, like Dallas, before they hired Nico Estevez. It was like within 72 hours of their job being open, I was told it was like 85 people reached out. And again, that doesn't mean that it's, Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola, right? But that also doesn't mean it's 85 high school coaches either, right? Like, so these are jobs that a lot of people want. Again, he could have stayed in England. It's not that he's coming here because he didn't get any offers in England. And again, at 32 years old now, more offers would have been coming, right? Like, it's not like a desperation play or anything. It's he wanted to be here. He thought that this was a good spot for his career. And I know that he and Khalid had either known enough of each other that they wanted to work together. Like, that was part of the selling point as well, that Khalid Al-Hamad and the vision that he's laid out for Minnesota is something that Eric Ramsay found himself wanting to be a part of. So yes, it is, like, again, I'm trying to answer this question without sounding like, breaking out the MLS pom-poms and just saying, whatever. But like, well and truly, I speak to like a lot of people about this, that like, this is where a lot of managers, intermediaries will reach out to me and be like, hey, what do you think about insert this manager? I'm like, wait, wasn't he in the Champions League a few years ago? Or like, whatever, right? Like, yeah, no, he wants to come to MLS. It's like, is he not getting any offers in Europe? It's like, no, he just wants to come to MLS. Like, that's a real thing. It's a real phenomenon for players and coaches. And it's just a sign of this league.
When you look at Minnesota United and the way they played against Austin in the opener, and I'm sure you've watched not all of every single opening game on the weekend because there's a gazillion of them and none of us have that much time. But when you look at Minnesota United and the way they played against Austin on the road, and I know it's Austin, it's not Columbus, right? They've got Columbus at home this weekend, but still, I went back and rewatched that game and I was like, this is not the same team. So clearly a new style has been implemented by Khalid, and knowing that the coach is likely on board because that was the message in preseason with Cameron Knowles, who, by the way, has done a fantastic job, and the players love him and his staff. But what did you see from Minnesota United? And I'm assuming I'm not like the only one out there that's thinking, wow, this doesn't seem like the same team.
Yeah, my first thoughts, again, from knowing that this is what Khalid wanted with the vision of the team, and again, knowing that this is what Eric Ramsay wants with the vision of the team, my first questions was, well, you want to play transition and pressing, and your 10 is Emmanuel Reynoso, and your center forward is Timu Pukki. Like, those don't scream like pressing monsters, right? Or whatever. So just like from speaking to people around the club, it's like they can spin it to like we get, it's not going to be like a Red Bull press, right? Like, because we don't have, and we don't even necessarily want to exactly go to like dial it up all the way to 10 or 11. So I think that this team will look a little bit different depending on the pieces on the field. Bonke's going to fit perfectly into this. He's tailor-made for this system. But I think Reynoso is going to be good in it as well. Like, again, they won't be end-line to end-line pressing and asking Reynoso to cover 10 miles a game. But what it's going to do is they hope that it'll get Reynoso the ball closer to goal more often, and that it'll make him even more dangerous when they do turn over the ball. And same thing with Timu Pukki, because again, his best qualities are finishing, movement, intelligence, like touches. He's not somebody who you're just going to stick at midfield and be like, go play in transition and go like outrun a fullback, right? Like, so it doesn't need to be dialed all the way up to 11. And again, I think that it's going to be more like that when those two players aren't available, like Reynoso wasn't this weekend. But moving forward, it's more about the fit with the group. And again, finding the context of I'm an ideologue, this is what I want, but also we're not going to force something if it doesn't make sense with the players in the group.
By the way, I thought Pukki looked a little more spry in that game. I mean,
he did.
He looked faster and like a little more agile than I remember seeing him last season. So And the other bonus is, right, if you win the ball higher up the field, then he's already in position to put something away. There were a few goals he scored last year that he was like ball over the top, ball through stretch line. He's having to outrun somebody, which doesn't happen very often against some of these center backs these days. So if you can win the ball higher up the field, that eliminates some of that for him with the high press. So, and then, just looking at the league opening weekend, what was your biggest takeaway? Maybe your biggest surprise? Benteke scores a hat trick, but does that mean DC United's going to be good? Like, how many people were sort of like, this was maybe not what we're really expecting? Maybe they kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, what's the word? Like,
or even that is just a 1-game sample size that
exactly. Or Chicago, right? What are your thoughts?
That was crazy. Yeah. And I think Philly, that's the best way to put it. Philly, they pride themselves on their back line and their defensive unit. Even when in 2022, when they had that stretch where they scored 6 goals in a game, 5 out of 10 games, even during that time, Jim Curtin cared more about the clean sheets and defending. And that's what they pride themselves on. They gave up 2 goals to Chicago, 3 goals to Saprissa last night or Tuesday night, and 2 goals, I think, to Saprissa in the first leg. So when was the last time that this Philadelphia Union team, as currently constructed, gave up multiple goals in a game, 3 games in a row, twice of which at home? So it's just there's a lot of stuff like that. I think the biggest takeaway for me was the CONCACAF Champions Cup hangover is undefeated. Maybe a better way to put it would be it's winless. There were 7 teams that played CONCACAF Champions Cup last week. And those teams had 0 wins, 6 draws, and 1 loss. All of them, I think, were favored. A couple of them were heavily, Orlando and Cincy were heavy favorites. Cincy home against Toronto, Orlando home against Montreal. Those are 2 very good teams playing at home against 2 teams that didn't make the playoffs last year. So they both drew 0-0. It's a thing. And it's almost I forget it every year. It's oh no, Orlando has the leg. Cincy's got enough rotation that they could bring in, and then still the early season CONCACAF Champions Cup, it'll get you. And it's crazy. We'll look back at this weekend in, early December, whenever MLS Cup is, and be hey, do you remember when Toronto tied Cincy? Or again, when Minnesota beat all, it's just it's going to be a different league on August 1st, let alone come the playoffs. So it's super fun. I love getting after it, but it is, we have to keep reminding ourselves, all right, this is 1 of 34 games plus Leagues Cup and plus Open Cup and plus everything else that comes, Champions Cup, all this that before we get to the playoffs.
Well, and that's a good point because, we can, it's kind of like when they make us do predictions. You're just talking about champions, CONCACAF Champions Cup in itself and having to play that amount of games in the rotation. And these teams aren't 90 minutes fit to begin with to start the season, let alone when you throw extra games in there. But it's so hard. And part of it has to be the parity in this league. And I know it's a bit manufactured parity, but nonetheless, it is why people love this league. I never would have picked Toronto to go into Cincinnati and get that result, to be able to even come close to it. So I guess that's why we all watch the games. It keeps us glued to our devices, to make sure that you just never know who's going to win or what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Or I spent the entire offseason talking about how great the Colorado Rapids did in rebuilding their team. And one of the points I kept making was not only were they a lot of good signings, they did the signings early, and a lot of it was domestic players, so they were going to be there for preseason day 1. That means that they won't start the season slow, and hey, maybe they come out the next few games and get some more results, but I'm talking about how good the offseason was, plus how quickly they'll start, and they're down 4-0 at halftime of game 1. It's
against a Portland
none of us
team,
know anything.
But against a Portland team that also everybody had no idea what to make of it. Under
team
Phil Neville.
That had, I think they finished with 0.5 expected goals. They scored 4 goals.
Honey Vander didn't even play.
Yeah. Not only didn't play, but it was a late scratch. They had to change the starting lineup 30 minutes before the game started. And again, I was, all the continuity, all the good signings. Oh, it's going to be really easy for Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. It's we either look like idiots or we just look like normal people because it just proves that you cannot, it's just, which again is why we love this league and we can sit here and laugh about it, but if my paycheck actually depended on picking the right games every week, I would be in big trouble.
All of us would. There'd be nobody in this business.
So what do you look ahead to this weekend? What's your, I know it's only, I don't know. It's not technically match day 2 for everybody. I'm so confused. Miami.
I don't care. I'm calling it match day 2. I don't care what it
screwing everybody up.
Is.
Yes. I just can't. It's even when we're talking team of the week and whatnot, I'm wait, what is this? Is this match week? Is it, I can't.
It's ridiculous.
So what do you look at going ahead to this weekend?
All right, I'll give the boring answer first. Miami, Orlando. And I promise this isn't just because it's
Boo.
Miami playing, right? Like, but I think Orlando is going to be one of the best teams in the league. I think that Orlando played Miami really, really well in that Leagues Cup run last year, and thought that was a really fun game. Again, like I think that they're gonna kick the crap out of Messi and co again. Like I think it's gonna be combative. It's a rivalry game. I love games like this. It's always good. Any game that has like a lot of juice to it at the beginning of the season right now because teams are still getting into it and everything. I'm not worried whatsoever about that one having intensity. But a low key one to go for the MLS hipster one. I think Dallas Montreal is going to low key be a lot of fun.
Really?
Pitar Musa for Dallas
Mm.
is going to debut. Jesus Ferreira should be back, as far as I know. I haven't checked on that in the last couple of days, to be fair.
It wouldn't matter. They might change it 10 minutes before the
Yeah,
game.
it doesn't matter. And then Montreal, I like a lot of their signings make sense. I like Laurent Courtois, their hire was a really good hire. Like they're just, I think, going to be a fun team to watch this year. And again, so Dallas Montreal is kind of like my hipster pick for this.
Are they going to be like Columbus reincarnated? Because I mean, you can't really do it
Eventually.
exactly. You know what I mean? Okay.
That's the idea. The idea is definitely to play with the ball, beat teams in possession, and they're gonna again. They don't have a Cucho or a Rossi or a Zelarayan before he left. But I think that they have a lot. Yeah, dude, nobody does. But it's even at that, they don't have the high end talent that Columbus has. But they're gonna do those same principles. I think that they'll remind us more of Nancy's 2021, 22, probably the 2021 Montreal team that, again, he inherited them a week before preseason. He was working out his principles. Again, Laurent Courtois is doing that right now. And again, I thought that they looked pretty good against Orlando, getting a result on the road against Orlando. They came out firing in the first 5-10 minutes, and that's how they're going to want to play. There's a lot of players in that team that make sense, like Yankov and Kokoro seem like a really good attacking duo. And again, Laurent Courtois, I think, is going to play something similar to Nancy. Again, every coach is different. Everybody has their own tweaks, and it's unfair to expect him to be, again, what's being viewed right now as the best coach in the league. But at least it's going to be in that mold.
Chicago overpay for Kuipers? Did I say his name right? I might have butchered it.
Kuipers, I believe.
Oh, okay. That sounds more realistic.
So you gave me a yes or no question, and I'm gonna give you too many words. I think yes, a little bit, because it's up to $14 million. That's a huge fee for somebody who, I think he was a little bit of a late bloomer. So he had really two really, really good years, but it's still a good signing, because in terms of the salary cap, it doesn't matter if he was 6 million, 10 million, or 12 million. He hits the cap as a DP, whatever it took to get him here. You know what's better? Signing a DP rather than not signing a DP center forward. So in the grand scheme of things, maybe it was a little steep, but I don't think that it even matters.
Well, and I kind of think too, I guess maybe overpaying that in that regard, more like the perception of it. I think a lot
true.
And maybe I'm not hearing correctly because you're way more in tune with what's happening, but where people are like, okay, you just put all your money in one basket kind of thing,
Yeah.
And I swear it was the extra time guy saying you still need someone that's going to get him the ball. If it's not Shaqiri, because he's kind of he's great, but he's not. And then, is Gutierrez finally going to be what they need him to be?
Yeah.
So if he doesn't get the ball, then what good is that? How many goals is he going to score if he can't be effective or have another threat that takes him attention away from him so then he can be more effective? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And that's kind of my concern with this team as well. They just had so much that they needed to do. They desperately needed a number 9 like him. But they also needed, as the extra time guys were saying, a better chance creator. And Gutierrez scored in his first game. Shaqiri looked good against Philly, but I know that I'm predisposed as a Liverpool fan to just any good performance from Shaqiri. I'm like, oh, finally, it's here, it's happening. Because I would say, again, I've been very disappointed that he hasn't hit quite the way I expected in Chicago. But again, if they can piece together enough chance creation from those two players, Kuiper should be all right. But again, they have a young DP spot open, so it's not 100% hit rate if you get a teenage number 10 to be that chance creator. But adding another creative type into that attack, I think it is their next priority.
So which team is going to overperform this year, or be beyond what people expect of them, and which team is going to totally be a disaster and they're expected to be better? Do you think Miami? I mean, a lot of people are picking. I don't know about Miami. I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little nervous. My stance on Miami is that I think that they'll be really, really dangerous in any cup competition that they're in, which includes the playoffs, of course. But like, I don't see it as a realistic possibility for them to challenge for the Shield. Like, I think that it's more likely that they finish closer to 7th in the East than it would be first. And that's also a product of the East being insanely good. But like, also, there's no reason for them to risk and like overload some of these older players for a Wednesday game against Vancouver, or, you know, oh, like, we have Champions Cup on Wednesday. Like this Saturday, maybe we'll rotate a few guys. Like,
Oh my
those
gosh,
are more.
the fans would lose their minds if it's a road game.
Yes, exactly. But like, hey, you got to manage the schedule. Messi can't play every single minute. Busquets too. Like Suarez, obviously, with all the stuff that's going on these days. So again, it just depends on where you see these teams. I think the Red Bulls are going to be, I think, really good, honestly. And maybe that's me reading too much into Emil Forsberg. And then as for teams that might underperform, I don't know. I think a lot of people think that Austin aren't going to be very good. I don't think that. I think that they're going to be the worst team in the league, to be fair. And I'm already going to have to start judging my stance on Houston. I thought that they were going to struggle much more without Hector Herrera, and their performances have been solid through, you know, their first 3 games, 2 of which in Champions Cup. I thought that they were going to look a whole lot different and a whole lot worse without some of these players, but man, I think I'm looking like I was wrong.
Yeah, I would agree with that though, because like with Sebas going down in that first game too, you know, then when I just did the Houston game, I was like, ooh, how are they going to make this work? We were sitting there looking at the starting lineup going, how is this actually going to look on the field? You've got Brad Smith playing like left attacking winger, you know, like, but Amin Bassi came back in the other day, I believe, and or maybe it was last night. I don't know what day it is, but yeah, so I think Houston, I think Ben Olsen, I mean, how much, you talk to so many people, how much of this is just having people that believe in the project, in themselves, in what they're doing? And I feel like I could say the same thing right now, but where Minnesota United is at. Like seeing them in that Austin game, no matter what they've been through during this off season and like the interim coach for the interim coach and not having an official head coach to start the season, this philosophy, the style, the camaraderie, like the vibe and the energy, I think there's a true belief in it. So how much do you think, even Ben Olsen with Houston, it's like some of that is a huge piece of the puzzle, is just belief in what you're doing.
Yeah, it is a huge testament to, like, again, I think Ben Olsen has always had like the buy-in from his locker rooms in DC, even when things weren't good. Like that was one thing that you could always rely on. They got much better tactically, and like his game model got cleaner, and like his ideas evolved again, which happened. Like human beings change, evolve, and want to do different things. I loved what they did last year, but still at the root of it, like you said, was that buy-in, was that togetherness, was that camaraderie. Charlotte FC is another example. Look at that roster. That's not like, just even comparing it to NYCFC, and I think that they thoroughly outplayed NYCFC, deserve that win. Looking at those two rosters, NYCFC's is far and away the better roster, the more complete roster, the more expensive roster, everything else. Dean Smith, everything I've talked to people around that team has been that Dean Smith has gotten this togetherness, this buy-in, this foundation in this group that they haven't had in a couple of years. So again, like, you need talent, obviously, to take you to where you need to be, but it works in lockstep with the mental side of the game, with the camaraderie side of the game, with the buy-in and being difficult to beat, solidity, everything else. So I think that, like, I misjudged it on Houston. Like, I think that their floor is higher because of that. Minnesota was another great point that you made. Like, they've had so much adversity this offseason, so many unknowns. I wouldn't have blamed them if they just rolled over this preseason and said, whatever, we don't even have a coach yet. Who cares? My contract's guaranteed. If the sporting director isn't even going to be here for the start of preseason, why should I care? Whatever, right? Like, and they didn't. By all accounts, preseason was really strong. And then what they did to Austin, again, they're one of the what I just called the worst team in the league. I don't care. Going on the road and beating a team without Reynoso and Bongi, like, without a coach, without all of this, like, that's a great result, and well done to them for doing it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like Dean Smith was laying down the hammer right from the first. What was that quote? Like, these are my DPs. Like, you know what I mean?
Somebody taught him what designated player was, and then he worked it into his first 3 press conferences. I'm so proud. I'm so happy.
But I just love that he's like, I don't care. Like, I don't know when the last time, to be fair, a lot of players when they come over here don't know what a DP is either. It's a very MLS thing, but yeah. I just love that. The other thing players and actually probably really appreciate is honesty, even when it's brutal. Yeah. So So they're like, see
Exactly.
you later. Yeah. I'm not your DP. So well, I'm looking forward to the season opener on Saturday. I shouldn't say season opener, home opener on Saturday. And, you know, I was at that open training yesterday and I heard some lady walking in and she's like, well, I'm excited to see if like this is the real Minnesota United or that was just Minnesota United against a terrible Austin team. So, so you're not the only one that thinks Austin's going to be bad. But yeah, this will be a good test for him, you know. And I think yesterday it was reported they're not sure if Ray and Bogert are going to play this weekend either. So, but they look pretty good with not that you wouldn't rather have Ray and Bogert in the mix, but you know they look pretty good without him. So we'll see. But Tom, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm so sorry for, you know, I'm sure you have nothing going on that I could just keep moving you around in the schedule, but I appreciate you taking the time today.
Come on, I always got time for you guys. Thank you so much. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Have a great day. Talk to you later.
See ya.
All right, everybody, that's another episode of Sound of the Loons. Join us again next week after Minnesota United's home opener. Maybe a W, maybe 3 points. We'll see. Nonetheless, it's going to be 60 degrees and sunny on Saturday, so head out to Allianz Field. Thanks, everybody.